Hello class, we're about to start section 3.5, notes, linear inequalities in one variable. Inequality, a statement that uses inequality symbols, less than, greater than, instead of the equal sign that is used in an equation. Consider the inequality, 6 is less than 12. What happens to the inequality sign if you add the same things to both sides? So let's say we added 2 to both sides. We have 8 is less than 14. The inequality symbol stays the same. The next thing, subtract the same things from both sides. Let's say we subtracted 2 from both sides. Inequality symbol stays the same. Now here it looks as though this is a misprint because it has the same thing. Now on your paper it may not have this, but let's go down here to multiply both sides by a positive number. So let's multiply each side by 2. So we have 6 is less than 12, multiply each side by 2. So this would be 12 is less than 24, so the inequality stays the same. Now divide both sides by a positive number. Let's divide both sides by 2. So this would give us 3 is less than 6. So the inequality stays the same. Now, we have multiply both sides by a negative number. So let's multiply both sides by a negative 2. So this would give us negative 12. This would give us negative 24. Now we know negative 12 is greater than negative 24. So what happens here is it flips the sign. So if you notice, the inequality sign went from pointing to the left to now pointing to the right, or went from less than to greater than. Now, the next thing we would do is divide both sides by a negative number. So let's divide both sides by negative 2. So this will give us negative 3. This will give us negative 6. And again, as you see, it flipped the inequality sign. So it flips the sign. So of all of the scenarios that you did the same thing to both sides, these are the only 2 scenarios where the inequality sign flips. Now we come to the next page. It says to solve an inequality, get the variable by itself. If you have to multiply, divide both sides by a negative number, you must reverse the inequality sign. So basically what you do before you divide or multiply each side by a negative, you solve this the same way you would as if it was an equation. So first of all, we need to distribute these parentheses. So we have 7x minus 7. This would be a negative 8x or minus 8x plus 16. It's less than or equal to 5. 7x minus 8x will give us a negative x. Negative 7 plus 16 will give us a positive 9. And that's less than or equal to 5. We will subtract 9 on both sides. And we had negative x is less than or equal to a negative 4. Now we would divide each side by negative 1. And since we divided each side by a negative, we know that changes the direction of the inequality sign. So it'd be x is greater than or equal to 4. Now this is the inequality answer. Now they asked us to write the answer as an inequality, want us to graph it, and also an interval notation. Now I think doing interval notation next probably would be easier, because whenever, I told you all, whenever is equal to, now this is a or equal to, but it still can be equal to 4, you will put a bracket, because this means that 4 is included and it goes all the way to infinity. So it's positive 4 all the way to infinity, because this is x is greater than or equal to 4. So 4 would be the lowest included number, and it will keep going on forever. Now, if you want to see this visually or graphically, this is how we would do it. Depending on how you were taught to graph, I always like to put 0, and I like to put down the number that we have here, which is 4. Now, depending on how you were taught, when you had a greater than or equal to sign, you know it would be a closed circle. Now, this is what most people are taught. You have a closed circle, and then since the variable is first, we would draw the line in the direction that the inequality is going. Now, this is one way of graphing it. Another way of graphing it is using this here. Instead of the closed circle, since we use the bracket here, we can use a bracket here as well. So I will let you know in class which one I want you to use. But remember, closed circle and bracket means the same thing. Okay, now we go on to B. Now we have these fractions here. Remember, we want to get the variable by itself. But first, let's get rid of these denominators. We could do this just like we would do a regular equation. We'll multiply everything by the common denominator, which in this case would be 8. So we would end up with 7 minus 20x is greater than a negative 6x plus 20. Now we want to get everything on the same side. So I want all my x's on the left and all my numbers on the right. Now if you notice here, I did 2 steps at once. I moved this x to the left, I moved this number to the right. So this will end up with negative 14x is greater than, what's that, 13. We divide each side by negative 14. And x is less than a negative 13 over 14. Because remember, since we divided by a negative, we have to change the direction of the inequality. Now, here's the thing. We don't have an or equal to sign here. So we know we're going to use just parentheses, not brackets, when we write the interval notation. And since this is less than this value, that means that we will go from the left, which would be negative infinity, and we'll go a little bit before this negative 13 over 14. Because remember, this parenthesis means that this is not included. We'll get to the number that's just before this number here, and this is where this interval will end. Now, we have to graph this, just like we did in the last problem. Now again, like I said, I like to have a 0 here, and then the actual number that we're using, which is a negative 13 over 14. Now again, if you are used to the closed and open circle, when you don't have an or equal to sign, you will put an open circle, and then you would draw the inequality in the direction it must go, which is to the left. So this would be your answer if you were using the open circle. Now listen, for those of you that use the parenthesis, the open circle and parenthesis means the same thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw this up here. You'll put an open parenthesis on a negative 13 over 14 and draw your arrow. So these are the graphs and the interval.